They may be god-awful ugly, but it's still a very, very, very valuable brand. I'm Andrei Mincov, the founder of Trademark Factory, and in this video I'm going to share my thoughts about yet another trademarking screw-up. This time around, it's Uggs punishing a vendor from Australia. All right, let me read it from the article, and as always, you can find the link in the description below. Ugg, kick in the guts as Aussie maker loses US trademark case. Sydney-based Eddie Uyghur ordered to pay damages after footwear and apparel company Deckers puts its foot down. The Australian Ugg boot maker Eddie Uyghur has suffered a $450,000 loss in his David versus Goliath legal fight with a major US footwear and apparel company. A jury in Chicago found Uyghur's business, Sydney-based Australian Leather, willfully infringed a trademark registered to California-based Deckers Outdoor by selling Ugg boots online to customers in the US. After a 4-day trial, Uyghur was ordered to pay Deckers statutory damages of $450,000, and he may face an order to pay millions more in legal costs. Deckers generates more than $1 billion in annual sales from its Ugg brands. Like I said, this could be a god-awful ugly boot, but it generates a ton of money, which means it's a valuable brand, right? You may hate them as much as I do, but you can't deny that it's a valuable brand. Same idea with McDonald's. I love McDonald's, but a lot of people go after McDonald's. Well, it's horrible food, it's not healthy, it's not yummy. I don't care how healthy it is. I think it's super yummy. But again, it's not about McDonald's, it's not about me. What I'm saying is it doesn't matter what you think about the product. If enough people invest their own money voluntarily to support that product, it means that product is good enough for the market. And if it's good enough for the market, it means it has a brand that's valuable. So let's keep going. Uyghur argued Ugg is a generic term originating in Australia from the 60s surfing community. It's been a cruel blow, said Australian lawyer and former Senator Nick Xenophon, who is in Chicago supporting Uyghur. Everything he has worked for in Australia for over 40 years has come to this. Deckers acquired the Ugg Australia trademark in 1995. Deckers products have been widely accepted by the public and are enormously popular, as demonstrated by over $1 billion in annual Ugg sales. Deckers wrote in its complaint to the US District Court. The Ugg trademark is a famous mark. Xenophon said Uyghur was devastated and defiant after the verdict and hoped the Australian public, Scott Morrison and Bill Shorten, backed the businessman's plan to appeal. It's not just a devastating blow for Eddie Uyghur and Australia, it's a devastating blow for Australian jobs, Xenophon said. The term Ugg should never have been trademarked. It's a generic term that should have been protected by Australian governments in the past. Now, if it's a generic term, then Australian governments couldn't have protected it. So there's a contradiction. It's either a brand that Australian government could have claimed for itself, or it's not. It may be a generic term in Australia, but the question of genericness is not decided universally, it's decided on a per country basis. So what's generic in Australia is not necessarily generic in US, and for US it's not generic, and it wasn't certainly in 1995 when that trademark was registered. And so there you go, there you have it. You have to be cognizant of the fact that the world is a big place with different countries. And if you have online sales, you have to be very careful to make sure that jurisdictions that you sell to, especially those that you have a lot of clients from, that you're compliant with their laws, especially laws on intellectual property, laws about trademarks. Because if you're not careful, you can get into the situation when you are slapped with a $500,000 judgment against you. Yeah, as defiant and disappointed as you could be, this is what can happen. So let's keep reading. As disappointing as the verdict is, what has been incredibly disappointing is the Australian government has failed to stand up for Eddie by providing him the legal assistance he deserves to fight this case. Eddie and his tiny company have been doing this all on their own. Well, first of all, it's not the role of the government to spend taxpayers' money to support a business owner who didn't bother to make sure that he can lawfully sell his products to the country where that brand had been trademarked. So it's not just what governments should do, and that's not something that taxpayers should pay for. So as disappointing as this may be, Uyghur is the only one who made the mistake here. Now, whether Australian government or somebody else could have claimed this brand originally for themselves is a different issue. Again, I don't think that the taxpayers should bear the expense of this brand being protected, because just because it's generic in Australia doesn't mean that only Australian citizens can make Ugg boots, right? It's a distinct privilege, of course, to make the ugliest boot on the planet and say, well, it's generic here in Australia. But jokes aside, it's not proper for the government to take care of stuff like that. So the lesson here is this: he must have known that the brand is trademarked. And if he didn't know, then he deserves everything that's coming his way. Because if you've been in business for 40 years selling a product and you don't know that you don't own the brand and that actually somebody else does, and you don't know that somebody else is selling $1 billion worth of the product with your name to the world, and you don't know it's trademarked, you don't deserve to call yourself a businessman. That's the one thing. The second thing, he probably thought, well, I have this amazing argument that that's a generic term, so I don't care about this American company that owns the trademark. If they go after me, I will say it's generic. I'll, extend my hand and ask the government to help me out, because of course the government should do this, right? Another big mistake. Well, two big mistakes. First, you don't stand there with your hand out and asking and waiting for the government to help you. And most importantly, just because you think you have a good argument that the brand is generic and should not have been registered, unless you have the resources to actually prove that in litigation, until it's canceled, until you made your case compellingly enough to cancel that trademark that can be used against you, you have to treat that trademark as fully valid. This is what presumption of ownership and validity are all about. Until you prove that it's not a valid trademark or that it should be owned by somebody else, the person whose name appears on the trademark certificate is deemed the rightful owner of a valid trademark. So whatever arguments you have in your head that you could use against whoever is going to go after you, if you don't have the resources to enforce that argument that you have, assume that you don't have an argument. Because especially for situations when the other side has a lot of resources, and a company that makes over $1 billion in revenue selling that product under this brand, I can tell you they do have enough resources to go after you to protect their brand. And there's one thing that pisses me off more than anything. So they whine about, oh, he's been in business for 40 years and he's been selling his ugly shoes, and how come, the American multinational corporation is going after him, all this, whiny nonsense. But 40 years, he says, he's been at it. What stopped him from getting that trademarked in the US in the first place? He would have been the first. He could have been making billions of dollars. But because he was playing small, because he didn't bother to protect the brand that he could have owned, all he got is a $450,000 judgment against him, and he doesn't have a clue how to pay that. Now, that's really what this whole thing is about. And if you found this useful, if you found it interesting, make sure you subscribe now and get notified whenever the next video goes live. And if you've got a brand, if you feel that you've got enough of a market in certain jurisdictions, they don't have to be your home country. If you sell your product to a country that you haven't protected your brand in, you're playing with fire, because somebody else can trademark your brand there and stop your sales. If you're making your product in a country that's not your own and you're importing it, guess what? Somebody can trademark your brand there and make sure that you can't export your own products from that country to yourself, because trademark use is not just selling it, it's also exporting it. So be very careful about where you protect your brand. And if you sell your products to a lot of people in a certain jurisdiction, make sure you got your brand situation taken care of there. And if you would like to protect your brand in any of the 130 plus countries that we can help you file your trademark in, with a free comprehensive trademark search, with a single all-inclusive flat fee, with 100% money-back guarantee. If that sounds like something you would be interested in, go to trademarkfactory.com and book a call with one of our strategy advisors, and they'll help you get started. Until then, I'll see you in the next video.